South. Have you done something wrong? Hide it, and it will haunt you. Own it, and you're on the road to overcoming it. So confess your sins, and the Bible says God will cast all your sins into the depths of the sea. How wonderful!
For your free copy of Dr. Guido's daily devotional, Seeds from the Sower, write The Sower, Mentor, Georgia, 30439.
Visit us on the web at The Sower.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Friends, we do thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to ask that perhaps you set aside anything that might distract your full attention to listening today, because today's program comes as a warning. I wish I didn't have to talk about this issue today, but just as the watchman must blow the trumpet when he sees danger, so must we. Our topic today is one that will likely turn your stomach as it did mine. Today we will alert you to yet another child in the government school system who was secretly transitioned. There's a major effort underway to so-called protect children from their own parents who refuse to be affirming of a gender identity that does not match the child's biological sex. Your child is the target. I'm going to say this again. Your child is the target of LGBTQ plus activists. Don't take my word for it. Hear from the activists themselves. First, a clip from the recent gay pride parade in New York City from a previous year. Here's what they are having to say. Yes, we're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children. Now, that was New York City. Let's go to the other end of the country for the Gay Men's Course in San Francisco.
As we celebrate Pride and the progress we've made over these past years, there's still work to be done. So to those of you out there who are still working against equal rights, we have a message for you. You think we're sinful? You fight against our rights. You say we all lead lives you can't respect. But you're just frightened. You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked. Funny, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly.
I'm going to stop it right there, friends. Indeed, will corrupt your children. Happens bit by bit. Your children are in their crosshairs. And now let me take you to a hearing in a community regarding a drag queen story time where a drag queen by the name of Dylan Pontiff admitted they are grooming the next generation.
But I'm here to let you know that this event is something that's going to be very beautiful, and for the children and the people that support it are going to realize that this is going to be the grooming of the next generation. We are trying to groom the next generation to not see the way that they just did.
Okay, we're going to groom the next generation. So, friends, this is the backdrop to what is going on today and to our topic today. The activists admit your children are in their crosshairs, and this grooming and transitioning is happening on many fronts, including in school districts all across this nation. We're going to focus on what is happening in Colorado, but it's not limited to there because, as we said, this grooming is happening all over. Parents are being vilified, and schools are becoming the surrogate parent. We know better. The courts know better than you do as parents. Joining us today, we welcome back Alex Newman. He's an award-winning international freelance journalist, author, researcher, educator, and consultant, senior editor for The New American. He is co-author of Crimes of the Educators and author of Deep State, The Invisible Government Behind the Scenes, and author of Indoctrinating Our Children to Death. He covers this topic in his books. He's founder and CEO of Liberty Sentinel, a national syndicator of radio and TV programs, including Behind the Deep State, which airs on WVCY television and VCY.TV. Alex, thank you for joining us today.
It's an honor to be with you. Thank you so much, Jim.
Alex, if what we've heard so far doesn't affect us, it's really time to check our pulse.
Yeah, it's serious. When they're coming for your children and they're telling you they're coming for your children and they're singing about it and they're marching through the streets bragging about it and they're actually doing it, we need to sit up and pay attention, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, an uncle, even just a neighbor, even just a decent human being. We need to recognize that children must be off limits for this. But unfortunately, as your listeners just heard, Jim, this is finding support at the highest levels in terms of policymakers, in terms of culture shapers, and very, very powerful people. It's hard to overstate the danger of what we're facing here.
We keep hearing these words. We have to be gender affirming. I mean, that mantra is appearing over and over again. Alex, to what extent is this taking place? This gender affirming care, gender affirming, attitudes toward children.
Well, all across the country right now, and this is even happening in some conservative states. I think there's a tremendous naivete among people who live in more Republican-leaning states that this isn't happening there. It is happening all over the country. Children are being given this, what's euphemistically referred to as gender-affirming care. But I think in the interest of honesty, we need to be very clear about what we're talking about here. This is not gender-affirming care. This is surgical mutilation of a child's genitals. This is double mastectomies on little girls. This is castration of little boys. This is horrific, irreversible surgeries that will forever sterilize these children. We don't let them smoke a cigarette. We don't let them drink alcohol, but somehow we're expected to believe that they're mature enough to make a permanent, irreversible, life-destroying decision. And the government is facilitating this. First of all, the government is encouraging it in virtually every state, by the way. This is true in Florida. It's true in South Carolina. It's true in Oklahoma. Government schools are encouraging this kind of confusion in children. They're telling children as young as kindergarten that they may have been born in the wrong body and that the solution to that alleged problem is to be castrated, is to undergo one of these so-called gender-affirming care procedures. And then the government is in many cases paying for it. In many cases, they're doing it behind parents' back. If they determine that a parent is not supportive, if they determine a parent is not affirming, they oftentimes get Child Protective Services in the loop. They do these transitions at school without informing parents. In fact, they specifically lie to parents to prevent them from finding out under the guise of protecting the well-being and privacy of the child. This is ubiquitous, Jim, and we warned that this was coming. It's here now, and it's going to get worse unless parents start paying attention.
Alex, tell us about the Kelly Loving Act, so-called Kelly Loving Act, just signed into law in the state of Colorado by Governor Jared Polis.
Yeah, it almost sounds like too much to believe, Jim. So I encourage your listeners to fact-check what we're talking about and recognize that we're not making this up. I wish we were making this up, but we are not. The legislation, as it moved through the legislature, would have had government courts intervene in families where parents were not affirming. And in fact, a parent could lose custody of his or her child if that parent refused to play along with the gender delusions that are being instilled in the minds of these children at school. So hypothetically, Johnny goes to school, is told by his teacher that he might actually be a girl or a bigender or a trigender or a free spirit or a neutral, or you pick whatever fake gender identity that they're assigning to these children. The child goes home. Dad doesn't support this idea. This situation ends up in court. That father could lose custody of his child as a result of not being supportive of this. Now, some of the most extreme stuff was removed from the bill, but it still includes massive overreaches, blatant attacks on parental rights. It actually requires people to play along with this fiction. If you refuse to use somebody's pronouns, right? If they say their pronouns are these or a tree or them or pick a term. If you refuse to play along with that, you could be accused and charged with discrimination. They have a term called dead naming, where if it's using a person's real name, a person's given name, you could be in trouble for that. So this is a very serious attack on common sense, on parental rights, on free speech, on really bedrock foundational principles that have always underpinned our system of law in this country. And this is just a foretaste of the extremism that's coming if people don't step up.
Yeah, and this is what's really important. And Alex, this is really nothing new. I mean, we're seeing advancements in this, like it's taking leaps and bounds moving forward in promoting this agenda. But I hearken back to just a couple of decades ago when we discovered that our Milwaukee Public Schools had a gay and lesbian advisory committee that was meeting monthly. We have a manual here, Alex, that was telling us teachers how to implement this into the classrooms, how to put up posters in your classroom, how to increase your library holdings, how to introduce the topics into all classes. I mean, even your math story problems, so that you use members of the same sex as being like a husband-wife, team and so forth. This is over 20 years ago when this was coming out here, Alex, and we are seeing the fruit of this all throughout schools across the nation.
That's exactly right, Jim. And you're really, I think it's very important to point out that this has been going on for a long time, as you just said. The first documented case that I became aware of was almost a decade ago in Minnesota. There was a child, I believe he was 16 years old at the time, had become convinced that he was trapped in the wrong body and that he needed this so-called gender-affirming care. His mother, he lived with his mother. His mother absolutely refused to allow this or to participate in this. And so this child, with help from the school, was emancipated. He was declared free from his parents. And this school went to a government hospital and facilitated a so-called sex change operation, where this child was transitioned to a new gender. And in fact, this made mainstream news. It ended up becoming a federal court case. And the federal judge in the case actually ruled that the mother's parental rights had not been violated in this case, even though her 16-year-old son was subjected to one of these so-called sex change surgeries. And now this was a decade ago. It has become much more extreme since then. Just a few years ago, going back to Colorado for a moment, I became aware of a story that almost sounded too shocking to be true. A little girl, 12 years old, was asked to stay after school for an art club. She asked her mother, "Can I stay after school for art club?" Mother said yes. She was told at art club that if she didn't feel perfectly comfortable in her body, and what girl going through puberty feels perfectly comfortable in her body, that she might be a transgender and she should pick a new gender identity. And they gave her little trans flags and stickers, and they said, "Don't talk to your parents about this. Your parents aren't a safe space. Here's my phone number." The teacher gave out her phone number to the children, said, "You can talk to me, but your parents are not a safe space." Well, this little girl apparently had been taught properly by her parents, so she told them what had happened at school. The parents quite naturally decided this was very inappropriate. They removed the girl from the school, put her in a private school, and the school faculty, the school administration, we ended up with the emails through Freedom of Information Act request. They decided to get the Child Protective Services involved. They suggested that the parents were a danger to their own daughter because they were affirming this gender delusion. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Most parents who go through this don't speak out because they're told by the school that your child will kill him or herself if you do this. But this is now happening across the country, even without these statutes being formally in place.
So we have this girl who told her parents what the goings on at the school, but how many children are not telling their parents and falling victim, Alex?
That's exactly right. And nobody knows the true number, but it is certainly in the millions at this point, if you look at the data we have. Even 6 years ago, I was in Utah, which, by the way, is one of the most conservative states in this country, governed entirely by Republicans, very conservative Republicans, supermajority in both houses of the legislature. I was given data by some members of their state school board. I was at the Capitol doing some talks. And what the data showed was there had been a 10,000% increase in a 5-year period from 2015 to 2020 in little girls undergoing these medical transitions. And that's Utah, folks, so the numbers are off the charts.
Alex Newman, our guest here today on Crosstalk. And friends, we're talking about schools secretly grooming and transitioning children. It's not just theory, it is fact. And friends, we're going to be hearing the testimony of an individual, a parent, in this next segment. His name is Dustin Gonzalez, who lost his daughter to the grooming and transitioning efforts. We'll be back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, what can you tell me about those huge flying reptiles?
Chris, some of the flying reptiles were as large as a mid-size aircraft. Some people have wondered how in the world they could have ever flown. As it turns out, they really couldn't fly in today's atmosphere. There's not enough air pressure to keep them up. Creationists have long supposed that the environment before the flood was quite different than now. We suspect that air pressure was quite a bit higher than now, making it more reasonable that these huge creatures could fly. Recently, an engineer built a model of one of these flying reptiles and tried to make it fly. He found that it had many wonderful adaptations to increase the flying ability, but there still wasn't enough air pressure to keep it aloft. To evolutionists, it's a big mystery, but to creationists, we at least have a plausible theory. And we get that by going back to Genesis.
For more on creation, visit our website at www.icr.org.
You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network. With us today, Alex Newman. He is an award-winning international freelance journalist. He is senior editor for The New American website, thenewamerican.com, thenewamerican.com. Also, an organization he established, Liberty Sentinel, and you'll find articles and writings there. He's founder and CEO of Liberty Sentinel at libertysentinel.org. That's libertysentinel.org. Alex, we've got a troubling testimony that we are going to be sharing with our listeners here today of a man by the name of Dustin Gonzalez. And so I'm going to air this to help our listeners understand what we're talking about is not just theory. It's actually going on. This is really heart-wrenching testimony that he spoke, but set it up for us here. You have spoken with him. Tell us about Dustin Gonzalez.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. So this is a father in the state of Colorado, not the father of the child I just referred to earlier. This is a different county, a different school board, but a very similar story. This child was groomed at school to believe she was a new gender identity. She was encouraged to pick a new gender identity, and she chose non-binary. And, of course, the school knew very well that the father was not going to be supportive of this, and so they hid this from him for 2 years. One of the things that was very interesting that he shared with me on the phone is that just in her class, just in this one class, there are 10 other little girls who have chosen these new gender identities, everything from transgender to non-binary and genderqueer and these kinds of things. Some of them have already been started on the medicalization path where they're taking hormones and being prepared for surgeries. And this father, of course, was very upset when he found out about this, was very upset about the law that was being debated in the legislature that would have revoked his parental rights for refusing to affirm this kind of delusion. And he gave a very powerful speech at the school board warning them that there were going to be serious electoral consequences for this.
Friends, this was testimony he gave April 10, 2025, before the Jefferson County, Colorado School Board. Listen in.
My
Alex, your response to this testimony?
Yeah, it is, and should be appalling for anybody. And really, this goes beyond politics. This goes beyond religious differences, theological disagreements. There was a time when it was universally understood that other people's children are off limits. And what has happened here, in my opinion, Jim, ought to be considered a punishable offense, a criminal offense of the most serious sort. And it is my personal opinion that the people involved in the grooming of this child, in the trampling of this father's rights, ought to be investigated, prosecuted, and punished under the law. This is an outrage on human decency, and all I can think of is what the Bible talks about with those who cause children to sin and stumble, and would have been better for them that a millstone had been tied around their neck and they had been thrown to the bottom of the sea. This is an atrocity that's been perpetrated not just against this child, but against this father, and we've got to have accountability under the law to prevent this kind of horror from happening again.
You know, he was never accused, Dustin Gonzalez, he wasn't accused of harming his daughter, but he said he was just not ready to affirm this yet. And because of that, such actions were taken against him.
Yeah, and any sensible parent, when they find out their child is confused, would do what they could to try to fix that confusion by speaking the truth in love. And, you know, this is just as true if your 5-year-old boy says, "Hey, I'm Superman, I'm going to jump off the building." You say, no, honey, you're not Superman. You can't fly, don't jump off the building.
Right.
That's the same thing here. But what the ideologues here pushing this kind of stuff have done is they've created a series of junk studies. And I'm very thankful now that the federal government is starting to rebut some of this. HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, has put out some good research, even just in the last few weeks, showing what a fraud this is and how unscientific it is and how damaging it is to children. But these ideologues have created some junk studies falsely showing that children will be more likely to commit suicide if you don't affirm these confusions and these delusions. And so they have really cowed a lot of parents into remaining silent, into going along with this. And I think the parents instinctively know this is not good, but they're being told by the school and the school counselor that if you don't do this, your son or your daughter or your non-binary child is going to kill him or herself or theirself, as they say in modern parlance. And we have got to be crystal clear. This is an abomination. It's a crime against these children. It's a crime against these families. And you know, I think Dustin's response there was very measured. This is a horrific attack against this man's daughter and against him and his authority as a parent, and it's completely unacceptable.
Well, it's also unacceptable because it doesn't end there. I mean, they actually exploited his daughter, taking her before the state lawmakers to denounce her father's actions. I mean, for using her real name and his continuing to use she and her pronouns.
Yes, they did, and they paraded her in front of cameras, and she testified in the state legislature that she needed to be, I don't think she uses the term she anymore, but of course she is a female, that she needed to be protected from her father, and other children need to be protected from their parents who won't affirm who they truly are. And, you know, in a saner time, even 10 years ago, everybody would have said, okay, wow, there are some very serious spiritual and emotional and possible mental problems here, but this is not something that we should be parading through the legislature. This is not something that we should be putting on TV and pretending is normal. But, you know, you read Romans 1, and when a society suppresses the truth in unrighteousness and gets handed over to a reprobate mind, I mean, this is what comes to mind when I read that.
I understand also the courts have stepped in against the father and limiting the time that he is able to spend with his daughter?
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable. So he now gets 4 days of visitation with his daughter every month as a result of his refusal to go along with this. And again, this was before this statute that they were talking about, the Kelly Loving Act, was even passed. So I expect it's going to get much worse in the days ahead. And, of course, Colorado is just the tip of the iceberg. Same thing is happening in other states, Minnesota, California, Illinois, and it will be coming to Republican states as well.
Well, and, okay, let's mention this Kelly Loving Act that had bipartisan support.
Yes, it did. A lot of Republicans now are being intimidated. Again, some part of it through this junk science, part of it through threats of primaries and big spending. especially in a state like Colorado, where there's a huge money involved from the teachers' unions. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention here, Jim, that there are some very significant Republican donors that are fully on board with this transgender agenda. They give a lot of money to the Republican Party, and so even though Republican politicians will generally speak out against this stuff when confronted, when push comes to shove, there is a lot of waffling there, and that was deliberate, that's on purpose, and I suspect we're going to see more of that in the years ahead.
And again, Alex, I'm going to harken back to something you said earlier in our interview, that his daughter, Gonzalez's daughter, is not alone. You said that the counselor has had, did you say 10 other kids identifying as genderqueer?
Just in that class, Jim. We're not talking about the whole school. Just in his daughter's class,
right,
there are 10 of the little girls who are picking new genders and being transitioned at school.
He was not aware, evidently, this was going on, because they don't tell your parents, and doing. Is this part of their MO, to secretly transition children?
Yes, it is, and they're being taught in professional development courses that that's necessary, because these children have evil, terrible, bigoted parents who are hateful and don't understand their child's true identity and won't affirm. So a lot of these teachers, they have been indoctrinated to believe, and I'm not absolving them of responsibility, but they have been taught in these professional development courses that this is the right and the loving thing to do, that this is required under law. Some of the things that I've gotten over the years, Jim, you almost can't even believe it. I've got video of a teacher in California, and actually I shared this with Tucker Carlson's team, and they put it on Tucker Carlson's show when he was still at Fox. The teacher teaching other teachers how to recruit vulnerable and mentally unstable children to start LGBT clubs at the schools. They used to be the GSA, the Gender, now it's called the Genders and Sexualities Alliance. It used to be the Gay Straight Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
So they are actively recruiting these kids. I've got another video that somebody sent me of the assistant superintendent of curricula in the Brea Olinda School District in California admitting that they're teaching children pedophilia and that this is necessary because it was a different sexual orientation that existed in history. So it's very important to teach children about adult sexual relationships with children. It's monstrous, and it needs to be punished.
Friends, a quick break here. We'll have more information to unfold because though he be in Colorado, the father here, Dustin Gonzalez, it's happening in many states. Matter of fact, just hours ago, I received a press release here at VCY regarding legislation introduced into the Wisconsin legislature as well. More to come. You're listening to Crosstalk.
If America is a secular nation, why are there so many spiritual themes in the monuments of our nation's capital? VCY invites you to see Stories in Stones.
Hi, I'm Tim Schmig, and this is Stories in Stones, highlighting the men and the manuscripts and the monuments of our national Judeo-Christian heritage. We're going to be looking at a couple of the sites that are often overlooked, but are really important to us as far as showing us the godly heritage that we have as a nation.
Join Dr. Tim Schmig to explore the fascinating stories behind historic monuments and gravestones in Stories in Stones. You'll discover the secrets they hold and learn about the past etched in stone. Stories in Stones contains a Blu-ray, a DVD, and a digital download all together for a donation of just $15. Call VCY America, 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Friends, we thank you for tuning in. Such an important issue that you need to know what is taking place. Schools secretly grooming and transitioning children. Alex Newman is with us today. Alex, just before we continue on, give us a word about the New American and also Liberty Sentinel, if you would.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. So the New American magazine has been around as long as I have, and it was actually created as a merger of two other publications. We do a lot of important work. We've been sounding the alarm about these things decades before they actually came to pass. We were warning about the arrival of homosexual marriage back in the 1990s. And it's not because we have some crystal ball or we're prophets or something like that. It's just because if you know where to look, you can find what's coming far in advance. So I would encourage people to check that out. It's at thenewamerican.com. We also do a print magazine. I would encourage people to subscribe. It's, in my opinion, one of the best publications in the world. And I've been writing there since 2009 when I was still in journalism school. Very, very good stuff. And we've been warning about these kinds of things. We've done multiple special issues on this transgender agenda in the schools, what's going on in the public education system, and all that's available for people. LibertySentinel.org is my organization ministry that I started in college as a college newspaper. We do a free newsletter people are welcome to subscribe to. We put out important alerts on issues just like this, actually. Mm-hmm. And we would encourage people to check that out. We do several radio and TV programs that are broadcast by different media, and we would love to have people check it out and sign up for the free newsletter at libertysentinel.org.
So again, friends, the website's thenewamerican.com and libertysentinel.org. Well, Alex, Colorado certainly is not alone in this, and there are, what we're seeing take place in so many states. May 19th, the Christian Post ran an article that a bill has been introduced in California that would allow courts to override parental objections to their children changing their names and sex identifiers on vital records, including their own birth certificates. Here is another headline. School district employee sues after being ordered to remove transphobic books from desk. We have state, and then from Maryland, we have state funds fat pride and gender unicorn in government schools. From WND.com, WorldNet Daily, groom children watch school activity that demands students be gay or lesbian. Yes, a school activity that demands that students are gay or lesbian. And then here's another headline from the Daily Caller. Exclusive. School district pipe taxpayer cash into clandestine clubs, turning kids into LGBT activists. This is happening all over the country. And just a few hours ago, as I'm preparing for this interview, comes a press release from Wisconsin State Representative Robin Vining. And they have just introducing what they're calling the equality agenda, including legislation. Every Wisconsin child deserves access to the mental health care they need. My bill, LRB, that stands for Legislative Reference Bureau, LRB 1684, provides grants to school boards to provide training in LGBTQIA plus rights to school counselors and school social workers. This training gives school mental health professionals the tools they need to identify and address the unique issues facing LGBTQIA plus students, and will increase the quality of mental health care that these students receive in schools. Alex, it is just literally all over the place.
It absolutely is, Jim. And I think very few people understand the very sophisticated methods that are being used to indoctrinate children into these beliefs. It gets more and more sophisticated with each year that passes. They've got multiple approaches to this. But I think normal people look at this and they're wondering, what's happening? How did it happen that 50% of kids in some areas now are identifying as a new gender? 70% of kids are identifying as one of the letters in the alphabet. And they're using a number of different tools, some of them more obvious than others. One of the things that they do is critical theory. And so they introduce these concepts of oppression into the minds of these little children. We're talking kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and they tell the children to consider their privilege. If you're a heterosexual, you have privilege. If you're homosexual, you are oppressed. If you are cisgender, you have privilege. If you're transgender or non-binary gender, you have oppression. If you have light skin, you have privilege. If you have darker skin, you're being oppressed by those who do have lighter skin. And they've created this whole matrix of oppression, as they like to call it. And what happens is you've got a lot of these little children, they've got lighter skin, maybe their parents or their ancestors came from Europe, maybe they're Christian, and they're being told that they are oppressors and that it's their fault and their parents' fault. Every bad thing that ever happened to somebody else around the world is because of their privilege. And then they give the children an out. They say, but you could pick one of these letters of the alphabet, and then you too would be a victim. And what 8-year-old, what 9-year-old little girl wants to be an oppressor, right? They all want to be part of the victim class, and so they figure, hey, I can pick a letter, I'll be a victim too. It's one of the many, many very sophisticated means that they're using. Another is this, they call it social emotional learning, where it sounds very convincing to a parent who doesn't know what's going on. They say, oh, we're just going to teach your children these important values like compassion and empathy. What they don't realize is that the way the people who design these programs define compassion or empathy is very different than the way a normal person would. Under their competencies to be qualified as compassionate, you have to believe in abortion. You have to believe in open borders. You have to believe in homosexual so-called marriage. You have to believe in transing and gender-affirming care for children who've been confused. And if you don't agree with those things, you're not compassionate. And so these very sophisticated manipulation like this to capture the minds and the hearts of these children, and these kids are not prepared for it. Their parents aren't prepared for it. How are the kids going to be prepared for it?
So much of this, too, is coming under the guise of mental health care. But in my opinion, Alex, it's efforts like these that are directly impacting the mental health of these children who are experiencing gender confusion, largely due to the fact that they are being groomed.
Of course, Jim. And if you go back to the 1940s, 1950s, when we still had Bible, when we still had prayer in school, when God was acknowledged, when morality was acknowledged, the kids weren't killing themselves. The kids weren't shooting each other. The kids weren't taking heroin. The kids weren't making bomb threats, right? They maybe were chewing bubble gum or talking in class or something like that. Those are the big problems. What we're seeing now is that, depending on whose numbers you believe, a so-called mental health crisis that afflicts as many as 1 in 3, some estimates say 1 in 2 students. You've got suicide levels through the roof. We've never had this many suicides. In fact, among certain categories of young people, suicide is now the leading cause of death. And it all goes back to the false and, I would argue, diabolical worldview that's been instilled in the minds of these children from the moment they stepped into the government school classroom. And as long as we cannot stop the propagation of these false ideas and these false, really demonic worldviews, we're not going to be able to turn this crisis around.
And people are wrongly thinking right now, Alex, that President Trump, he's going to stop all this in the schools, Title IX and so forth. And I appreciate, some of the measures he's taken. But here's a headline from the Daily Wire, May 20th, 2025. Go down fighting. Emails reveal school official plotting to skirt Trump trans guidelines.
Oh, and this is the norm. I've got a video of the former president of the American School Counselor Association. Counselors are a big part of this machinery. In public, on a stage, talking to other members of the American School Counselor Association, saying we need to learn the rules. She specifically cites these laws that we passed here in Florida, the Don't Say Gay, that's what they called it, right? You just weren't supposed to be introducing children in 4th grade and below to LGBT stuff and sex stuff. So we need to learn these laws and these rules so we can know how to break them. They don't care what your legislature does if it interferes with this agenda. They don't care what the school board does. They don't care what Donald Trump does. They will continue to do this. They are on a crusade, a holy war to protect your children from you. And, as much as I hate to admit it, policymakers, including the President of the United States, are not going to be able to make a dent in this problem without systemic changes.
You're sounding, Alex, like this is all deliberate.
It is absolutely deliberate, and it's very easy to document this. We are talking here about actual doctrines of demons, Jim. And I think for a lot of people that sounds crazy. It's because they haven't been reading their Bible and they don't know the origins of this stuff. But I've written on it very extensively. In fact, in my new book, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, I go through quite a few of the examples where the people who are leading this charge will tell you on video, in public speeches, that they're communicating with spiritual entities. Some of them think they're, ascended masters. Some of them think that they're the spirits of dead people. But, of course, if you read your Bible, we're dealing here with actual demonic forces. And that's where this stuff is coming from. And for Christians, I don't think we can understand it any other way.
Alex, one last question here before we open phone lines. And friends, if you'd like to get on board with your questions or brief comment, our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. Alex, the question then is, what's a parent to do?
Yeah, that's a really important question, Jim. And I know this isn't what a lot of people want to hear, but I feel an obligation to say it. We have to go to God's Word, and we have to follow His instructions for the training up, the education, and the discipling of our children. God's Word is crystal clear. This is a job for mom and dad. Go to Ephesians 6:4. Fathers, don't provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the fear, the discipline, the nurture, the admonition, the instruction of the Lord. Go to Deuteronomy 6. You should be teaching your children when you wake up in the morning, when you're walking by the way, when you're going to bed at night, when you're sitting down to eat. And that doesn't mean we can't delegate some of these responsibilities. I've got my own children enrolled in Classical Conversations. It's a wonderful nationwide program. They got communities all over the country. I serve as a fellow there. It's one great option. I serve on the board for the Freedom Project Academy. It's a K through 12 classical Christian school. So kids can do, literally K through 12, 4 days a week, all the classes. So these are options that parents have. But I would say it starts with just making the right decision. I'm going to follow God's instructions for the upbringing of my children. I'm not going to be handing my child over to these systems. And I always urge parents, think of it like the building is on fire. If the building was on fire, you wouldn't discuss, what are we going to do with the children? How are we going to do this? How are we going to afford it? You wouldn't write a letter to your school board or lobby your legislators. You would run into that building, even if it meant your life, and you would pull your children out of there. Treat this situation with the urgency it deserves. And honestly, a burning building is an inadequate analogy, Jim, because a burning building is only going to hurt your children physically. What we're talking about here is the destruction of children, physically, mentally, spiritually, morally, academically, in every possible way. And so, yes, I know it's a sacrifice, but God will bless obedience. You've got to take charge of the education of your children.
Let's get to the phone lines, get our first one in before the break here. This is Carl in Charleston, West Virginia. You're on the air, Carl.
Hello, thank you for taking my call. First, I want to say that Alex Newman's an American hero and should be interviewed far and wide by conservative leaders. Secondly, I want to say that I was involved with the first shot in this war. It was in 1974 in the Charleston, West Virginia area, when parents rose up to stop what was happening to their children in the public schools. And if you'll allow me to, I want to mention a place that people can find facts about that on YouTube. Is that allowed?
Tell you what, we've got a couple websites. We're just seconds before the break, but we appreciate so much your call, and people can certainly just do a search on there as well on the topic of the Charleston schools.
They'll find the liberal side, but if you won't let me do it, that's your choice. Thank you, sir.
Very quickly, what is it?
It's the textbook war, and it has my name, Carl Priest, at the front, so they can separate it from the liberals.
The textbook war. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll be back in a minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewreport.com. As we've been saying for now a couple years, it's pretty clear most of the European leaders that are part of NATO want World War III. Recently, economist Armstrong, that's his last name, he mentioned that Europe is in big trouble financially. They have big financial troubles. And nations, well, they often want to go to war when they have financial problems. A, as a distraction, but B, so that Keynesian economics can kick in. When there's an economic crisis, the government becomes the primary spender. Nothing like government spending when it comes to a war and the military-industrial complex. Well, now the European leaders have unleashed any restrictions on how far those missiles can go into Russia. Clearly, again, European leaders want World War III. Americans had better pay attention. This could have devastating consequences. I'm Brandon House.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Alex Newman is with us today. We're talking about schools secretly grooming and transitioning children. And while we're on the air today, Alex, I understand there's news that has broken here just in recent hours regarding Floyd Brown of the Western Journalism Center. We've used many of their articles here on Crosstalk, and I understand that he's been removed from the Kennedy Center?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Breaking news, and I consider Floyd a friend and a brother. This is very sad. Apparently, CNN was preparing a hit piece regarding his previously expressed views on marriage and other biblical issues, by the way. God defines marriage, not man. And it seems like he was let go, which is very unfortunate. I'm hoping there will be some extenuating circumstances that come to light. But as far as we can tell right now, and as far as Floyd himself is saying on social media, this looks to have been a direct result of his stand in favor of biblical marriage.
My friends, let's go back to the phone lines. Ann is calling from Carthage, Missouri. You're on the air, Ann.
Yes, thank you, Alex and Jim. There are so many good teachers. I'm just wondering, how do they recruit and influence these teachers and counselors who should be very informed about mental health and concerned and focused on mental health? How do they recruit these people and influence them in the classroom? I appreciate your comment on the doctrine of demons, and perhaps that's more at the leadership.
Thank you, Ann.
What about the people in the classroom?
Okay.
How are they getting them influenced?
Very good. Thank you, Ann. Alex.
Thank you, Ann. And this is a huge topic. I wish we had more time to address it. You're right that there are a lot of godly men and women in the classroom to this day, but they are being systematically purged. A very good friend of mine in Florida, a very conservative district in Florida, was chased out because he refused to show pro-LGBT videos to his first period class, seventh graders. This was back in 2017, again, in a very conservative district in Florida. So they are working to purge those teachers who will not compromise their values. A lot of the time, they're portraying this as compassionate or backed by science, and unfortunately, a lot of these teachers just don't know better. Some of them are afraid to lose their jobs. Some of them are saying, well, maybe I could do more good if I stay in and keep my mouth shut on this issue. But one of the things that they're doing now, and this trend is developing very, very rapidly, is teachers are increasingly being sidelined. They're being turned into, for lack of a better term, glorified babysitters, just to make sure the kids don't throw spitballs at each other. And a lot of the teaching, a lot of the so-called education is taking place on devices that are programmed with algorithms and even artificial intelligence to bypass those moral scruples of the teachers who otherwise would speak out or would refuse. It's a very tough situation, but I'm glad you mentioned that. You're absolutely right. There are some very decent, honorable, godly men and women still in the system, and I praise the Lord for them. I hope that they can be a light in the system. But the reality is they are being targeted, they are being purged, and we need to keep them in our prayers.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Ann.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And let me also mention another way, Alex, is the teacher conference training from the teachers' unions and the in-service training. I've seen some of the workshops and the titles and the paragraph summarizing what's going to happen in those workshops, and it is all about this. To be affirming and really fulfilling the desires of the LGBTQ plus agenda.
Yep, and this is being portrayed as scientific and humane and compassionate and necessary for the mental health of children. And unfortunately, a lot of the people going through these, they call them professional development and different things like that, they're not prepared with a godly, correct response, and so they remain silent or even fall victim to this propaganda. So we need to pray for them because in many cases, they're all that is standing between these children and this horrific abuse. Let's get to Merle in Tennessee. You're on the air, Merle.
Yeah, Jim. Alex had mentioned about going back 10 years. That would have put it in the Obama regime era. And Kevin Jennings was appointed as the health czar, the school health czar under Obama. And he ushered in some very perverse, demonic, sexual stuff that was brought into the schools during that time. Everybody needs to look it up. Kevin Jennings under Obama, the school health czar. And also, I believe now there is some European countries, I'm not sure which one it is now deeming this trans stuff is indeed a mental and emotional disorder. Yeah. And I thought that could be a good start.
Thank you, Merle. Alex, I know you looked at Mr. Jennings quite a bit through your research.
Yes, the Safe Schools Czar. And this actually goes back to the previous question, too. This is how they get these ideas implanted in the schools. They say, well, if we want safe schools, if we want to stop bullying, we have to be affirming, right, which is a completely false binary and completely untrue. But, yes, Jennings was a disaster. And I'll remind people, even under Obama, if you remember correctly, Obama ran for president on a platform of supporting marriage. He didn't evolve, quote-unquote, on his views on marriage until after he was safely ensconced in the White House. That shows you how fast we have fallen. I mean, we're talking a period of a little over a decade, and imagine where we're going to be in a decade from now if we don't put a stop to this.
Tom in Redfield, Kansas, you're on the air.
Yes, I want to thank you guys for bringing this stuff up. What do we do as people that are seniors and all of our kids are grown and grandkids are even out of school?
Good question, Tom. Thank you. Alex.
That's an excellent question, and we encourage as much as possible grandparents to get involved. A lot of times, the vast majority of parents want to pull their children out of government schools. Survey after survey after survey has shown that, but they don't feel like they can because both parents are working. They don't have the money. They don't have the resources. If grandparents can come alongside their children and say, look, we'll help out. We'll homeschool the kids 1 or 2 days a week. We'll help out with the tuition for the Christian school. Whatever is necessary, that can make all the difference in the world. So I would encourage grandparents to really take this seriously. We're talking about your grandkids and your future great-grandchildren. Everything is at stake here.
Thank you, Tom. Laura in Watertown, South Dakota, you're on the air.
Thank you so much, Alex and Jim, for having this program. My son is a personal example. He's now 33. When he was in kindergarten, the teachers here at a special education school said he needed to be on this IEA program until the age of 21. He wasn't diagnosed as autistic, but they put him on Ritalin and Adderall, destroyed him. He was a first grader in with sixth graders. So your book, Alex, The Crimes of the Educators, hit home to the max with me. And the magazine, The New American, is the best investment I ever made.
Thank you, Laura. We're out of time. A final comment, Alex?
Thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate you. God bless you. And folks out there, everything is on the line here. Get on your knees in prayer. These are our precious children and our grandchildren. We must not fail them. And thank you, Jim, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Alex, as well. Friends, Alex has written about this, libertysentinel.org, and also check out thenewamerican.com, critical information. And friends, if you would take what you have learned today and share it with 10 others, in just a couple hours, a link will be up for this program. Send it around through your social media pages. Let others learn what you have learned today. God bless you. Thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.